How moving to begin with the words of Hazrat Pir Zia Inayat and the melody of Sheikh al-Mashaykh Mahbub Khan, sung so beautifully by you, Tarana. Welcome, welcome. Welcome to all who are joining from elsewhere. Shall we begin with the words of the invocation? Toward the One, the perfection of love, harmony, and beauty, the only being, united with all the illuminated souls who form the embodiment of the Master, the Spirit of guidance. Yes, after a summer's hiatus, our center here is now reconvening its classes, and this is the second of our gatherings devoted to the study of the Gathas. We've come now to the series on Pasya Anfas, the series concerned with the breath, and this is the first time that we're offering this class in a way that people all over the country and all over the world can take part in. Now, as this series commences, I would like to introduce, in addition to the theme of the Gatha papers, a second theme for our classes, and that is the 10 Sufi Thoughts. These are primary teachings. These are essential visions that articulate the essence of the path of love, harmony, and beauty. And so I propose that every week when we gather, we take up one of the Sufi thoughts and look into it. So we'll begin with a Sufi thought, and secondly, turn to the Gatha paper. And finally, we come to the contemplation of the rules, and we're now approaching the silver rules. Now, regarding the 10 Sufi thoughts, it should be remembered that they are thoughts, they are vistas for contemplations. They're not dogmas or even doctrines. Murshid said that anyone who wishes to follow this way may enter the path, whether or not he or she agrees with any specific thought. These are thoughts that are meant to open up a fuller view of the inner life and the nature of reality, but they're not imposed as doctrines that demand credence. But one will find that by contemplating them, they reveal meditative realizations, and so they need no external compulsion to bring them to life. They come to life through reflection, and what is realized then is realized through experience rather than ideology. So the first of the 10 Sufi thoughts is this: there is one God, the eternal, the only being, none exists save God. There is one God, the eternal, the only being, none exists save God. All of the 10 Sufi thoughts speak of oneness. And the original oneness, the first oneness, that with which we begin, is the oneness of the absolute, the oneness of the being that is infinite and eternal, whom we name God in the English language. Of course, many names have been ascribed to the one who is ultimately the one whom all names point to, but who transcends all nomenclature, transcending all name and form, all nama rupa. Now, if we study the history of theology, we see that the ideal of the one God has emerged gradually in the course of the unfoldment of human consciousness. And that in ancient times, in many cultures, there existed a belief in a multitude of supernatural figures. Retrospectively, we might recognize them as jinn, that is to say, disincarnate beings who possess a certain power and even influence in this world, but who are, in the ultimate scheme of things, limited personalities and ultimately mortal beings. But at various stages in human development, these supernatural beings have been taken as the primary subject of religious consciousness. All the while, in such cultures, there existed mystics and philosophers who recognized beyond the multiplicity of supernatural beings, one essential essence of life, called sometimes the One or the Good. But in popular conceptions, the mythology of the various divinities was the primary focus, and rites were devoted to the propitiation of these various personalities. Again, one can see these personalities as jinn beings who impress themselves upon the human mind. One can also see them as reflections of the attributes, the names, as it were, the qualities of that mysterious essence which is the essence of all. These are archetypal beings who reflect different facets of the nature of the one being. But in the course of further theological developments, there arose what is called henotheism, which is that while the believer recognizes a multiplicity of divinities, he or she is primarily concerned with one of them and considers this one to be the important one, the most powerful one, the most significant ones, and the others just more or less pale by comparison. And this is then our God. There may be other gods, but this one God is our God, the particular patron of us, of our people. This henotheism shows the emergence of the consciousness of the unity of God, but it isn't yet completely clear. God is still a God, but the most important of them. But then more and more it becomes clear that in fact this divinity who is the essence of all cannot really be compared with ephemeral, bounded, limited beings, however impressive, however supernaturally potent they might be. And this is clear, for instance, in the prophecy of Isaiah in the Bible. In the prophecy of Isaiah, the divine voice speaks to Isaiah in no uncertain terms, saying that no God was formed before me, and no God will be formed after me, and I am the Savior. And so it becomes very clear now. Of course, it had always been clear in the message of the prophets, but that message was not always well received or well understood. But it becomes clearer and clearer that, in fact, there is one divinity. And yes, that divinity has brought forth the multitude of the angelic and jinn beings. And there are many personalities, therefore, in the heavenly spheres, many celestial intelligences. But to speak of divinity, to speak of God, is to speak of the absolute. And that is to speak of being in its perfection, being in its totality, being in its essence. And so what becomes clear is that really God is one. And then in the Mohammedan revelation, in the Quran, we read, Allah nur samawati wal ard. God is the light of the heavens and the earth. So not only is there only one God, but the whole light of the heavens and the earth is God. Not only is there one God, there is only one being. There's only one light, that which manifests everything, that which reveals everything, that which is the essence from which all flows. That is one reality. It cannot be more than one. All arises from the one, is sustained by the one, and returns to the one. And divinity, therefore, is ultimately to be understood as singular. So from the idea of many gods to the idea of an important God, to the idea of only one God, to the idea of only one essential being, only one essential reality. This ideal has emerged in the course of human experience. And the spiritual path exists to now come to terms with the implications of the reality that there is essentially one reality, that there is one essential being, manifest, emanated forth, reflected and refracted in innumerable forms, but ultimately no individual form, no entity is permanent or autonomous. All that appears, transpires from the one, depends upon the one, returns to the one. It's a powerful realization. And whereas over the centuries that realization has sometimes existed as a kind of philosophical abstraction, the great opportunity is to translate that understanding into a tangible, moment by moment encounter with reality. So the first Sufi thought is this: there is one God, the eternal, the only being, none exists save God. And to bring home this idea, it may be an idea that already you have long contemplated, but we can always benefit from returning to it and deepening our understanding of what it means. And to do so, we could, for a moment, close our eyes to practice a reflection which is called Muraqabaye Ainaha, the contemplation of the mirrors. So sitting still in calmness, relaxed and attentive. With our mind's eye, we look out on the world and see how we have imagined the world as consisting of various things. Here a thing, there a thing, each thing separate and bounded. But we have to remember that how we perceive the world is a function of our consciousness. Things are only things insofar as we conceive them as things. If we sped up time and saw forms arising and dissolving in innumerable permutations, or even without speeding up time, if we looked microscopically and saw that that which seems to end somewhere in space actually blurs into its environment, and its environment radiates into it, we would not be so apt to speak so confidently of distinct things, but rather, taking a philosophical approach, we could say that what we call a thing is a transitory convergence of certain properties, certain qualities that cohere together, but then diverge to produce new combinations. So a thing is not a substantive entity, but a glimpse of the perpetual interplay of the various qualities that compose this world. Now you could conceive of the qualities as irradiations of the divine nature. The divine being emanates out from an essence that is indescribable, irradiating colors, initially a pure light, but a light that, passing through the prism of creation, produces colors. These colors are the colors of the universe, are the natures, the attributes that appear and disappear, converging and diverging in all forms. So any particular form is really the combination of qualities that it reflects. But those qualities are not unique to that appearance. The combination might appear relatively unique, but the qualities themselves are always to be found elsewhere. With the same palette of colors, one can produce an endless variety of paintings, but they are all manifestations of the same colors. So our contemplation is, instead of seeing a thing as a thing, when you look out on the world, wherever you turn, see mirrors. See that what you saw as a thing is a reflective surface reflecting the qualities of creation which shine out from the Creator. Now, a further step is to see that when you accumulate together all of the objects of creation, or what you have conceived of as objects, everything conceivable, all of this drawn together constitutes the universe, the whole manifestation. And you see that this universe is taken all together, one single mirror held up to the divine face. The universe is nothing in itself, but it reflects all that is contained in the hidden totality. Just as we do not behold our own face except in a mirror, the totality beholds its face in the mirror that is the universe. And all that is here, all taken together, is the reflection of the face of God. And a further step is to see that this universe that appears to us, it appears to us precisely because we are, each of us, a mirror. Not a thing, not substantial, but a locus in which the whole universe reflects. Even the stars that are far, far away, all of this reflects in the eye, in the mind, in the mirror. Each of us is a mirror of the cosmos and the cosmos is a mirror of God's face. So nothing is substantive in the way that we imagine it. There are not many things, ourselves included. But there is light, there is refraction, there is reflection, and ultimately there is only one seer and only one that is seen. Now we can open our eyes, and when we do, greet everything that we see as a mirror of the universe that mirrors God's face, while our own mind is a mirror to the mirror. And I'd like to read for you a poem from the Divan of Hazrat Inayat Khan that develops the idea of Tawheed, of the oneness of God. Allah is one alone. Look on the universe and find the proof. Within the house of life are many rooms. Above them all, the one oversheltering roof. And round the unit one, all numbers circle if ye reckon clear. To add or to divide, the great, the small, one as the center symbol doth appear. Within the world of men, Allah hath shown His oneness in each face, for each is different and is unique in all the changing crowds that make our race. And not in man alone, the earth is earth in ever-varying guise. The rocks, the trees, and even man himself are dust, as that which neath his footstep lies. And water too is one, the rivers wild, the gentle streams that glide, the quiet lake, the kindly drops of rain, are one with ocean's never-resting tide. And light and fire are one, the sun that rules the day, the moon by night, the wild volcano, and the electric spark that tamed can yield our homes its kindly light. The gentle air we breathe, the bubbles in the water that arise, and passing through the earth can wed with fire to form the ether round the air that lies. From ether come they all, the primal elements that four we name, and know as individual, yet they pass, returning to the ether whence they came. Some can no deeper see than nature, and to all beyond are blind. The Sufi saith, Allahu Akbar, the all in all, within, beyond, behind. Some worship many gods, and some, denying, bow the knee to none. By diverse names, in many varying lands, men call on thee, but thou art only one. And yet to call thee one were limiting to thy infinity. How can I speak to thee as separate, since I, as all beside, exist in thee? But language follows thee with halting feet, and bows the knee in all humility. So in these thought-provoking lines, Murshid calls upon the elements to testify to the principle of oneness and reminds us how earth is one. Our bodies are fashioned from the clay of the earth, but these bodies will dissolve back into that clay. How many forms have been built up from the earth? Buildings, bodies, innumerable objects, only to, in the end, dissolve back into the clay. It's one earth in its multitudinous formulations. Likewise, water, one substance. When we drink a glass of water, who can say where this water has been months ago, years ago, decades ago? Just imagine this one substance flowing around the world in skies, underground, through rivers, one body of water, quenching thirst in innumerable lives, descending as rain, evaporating, but one water. Likewise, fire. Likewise, air, the air we breathe. When we breathe it out, where does it go? And the air we inhale, where does it come from? It's one substance with innumerable waves. And if we look closely, everything is like this. We can't ever trace a boundary and say that this phenomenon ends here. It goes no further. Everything is interconnected, interrelated to everything else. And nothing is what it is, except for the reason that everything else is what it is. Everything is interconnected, interrelated, dissolving into and arising from one whole. That's a profound realization. And it's important to take that realization and bring it to the forefront of our mind. Let it not remain as an abstraction, because it will inform our ethical decisions, our lifestyle, our attitude, our relationships. Principle of oneness can become the foundation of a life that is conscious and connected, and which will generate ultimately a profound peace, the sense of arrival at home. Whereas the absence of this consciousness leads to alienation, the feeling of disconnection, which gives rise to fear and antagonism and the whole cycle of conflict that besets our world. So the principle of oneness, beginning with the oneness of what is primary, what is essential, what is forever, the unity of God. This is a powerful message and a most important subject for meditation. But let's turn now to the Gatha lessons. And we have come to the second lesson in the series on Pasi Anfas. The second lesson is entitled The Culture of the Breath. The air inhaled and exhaled that one feels through the nostrils or lungs is what we ordinarily call breath. In reality, however, that is as the stem of a tree whose branches are many. The mystic sees the whole body as a plant of the breath. According to the physician, the lungs are the channel of the breath, but to the mystic, the lungs are the branches of the tree, and other branches reach all parts of the body. The mystic calls all the branches by different names. This tree has a root in the body and has centers where the branches meet the stem. There are 5 such centers in the body. The breath has its particular work in every center. By the study of mysticism, one finds that human life depends upon the working of the centers. Generally, the centers are blocked up on the inner side of the body. Therefore, they give but a dim light. If the breath be pictured as a gas and the centers as lanterns. In the olden days, in Murshid's time, a gaseous vapor moved through the pipes to light up the lamps in houses and outside. So the metaphor here is one force moving through these different channels, lighting them up. When the centers are not in a fit condition, they are wasted. Not only this, but one is deprived of the full experience of life. Powers that are considered supernatural become natural when one leads a natural life. The first lesson of a natural life is right breathing. Many people breathe half a breath, many a quarter, and many still less. It is a certain direction that the breath takes that brings about sleep. And it is a direction of the breath that brings vigor or fatigue. One may, by the help of the breath, become stronger by doing physical exercises, and another, by physical labor, may become exhausted and worn out. The laborers in India who have to lift heavy weights have a certain way of breathing and work a great deal and yet feel very little fatigue. According to the point of view of the mystic, a natural full breath gives perfect health. And to a mystic's view, in 100 people, not one breathes rightly. Every Brahmin teaches his child the way of breathing when he is 9 years old. As it is a common thing that everybody breathes incorrectly, it rarely occurs to the mind that one's breath is incorrect. There are many reasons why people in general do not breathe rightly, but among them is the lack of education in this. As health is more important than anything else on earth, and as health depends entirely upon breath, which is the very life, it is necessary that the culture of the breath should be considered as of the highest importance. So Murshid speaks here of the metaphor of a tree and says that ordinarily, when we speak of breath, we mean to refer to the taking in of oxygen and the sending out of carbon dioxide. That is the physical breath. But Murshid says here that this physical breath is only part of the full phenomenon that the mystic understands as breath, which is like the stem. The physical breath is like the stem, but there are also roots and branches. And that this tree is constituted by a network of what are called lataif, or subtle plexi, which are interconnected and collectively empowered by prana, by the essential breath that moves through them. But when the centers are blocked, when that prana is not sent to the centers, then the centers have very little felt, they become vestigial, and they become dim. So there is a need to reawaken these subtle energetic organs. And Murshid has described 5 of them as being the primary ones. In the course of time, we'll have a chance to touch upon them. The uppermost being what is called the Arsh al-Azam, or the Great Throne, which corresponds to the top of the head, the crown. And then there is the center, which is to be found in the forehead, and which is called Arsh, which means the throne. And then there is the center in the chest, which is called Kursi, and which, with further exploration, reveals itself as having 4 chambers, 4 chambers in the chest region, but all of which belong to this phenomenon called the Kursi. And then descending further down, just beneath the navel, is what is called the Loh. Kursi in the chest means the footstool. And then in the abdomen, beneath the navel, you come to the Loh, which means the tablet. And further down still, you reach the tailbone, which is an energetic plexus called Kalam, which means the pen. And so these centers form a subtle anatomy through which energy moves, ascending and descending. And this movement is constitutive of the fuller meaning of the word breath. It isn't just the coming in and going out of air. Breath in its fullest sense means the pulsation of subtle energy through the life field. And Murshid goes on to say in the paper how one's normal breath is not necessarily one's natural breath. One has perhaps developed habits of breathing that are not optimal. For instance, holding back when one is breathing out, not fully exhaling, and then not fully inhaling. So one learns to empty the lungs completely and fill the lungs completely. And a great aid in this is the awareness of the undulation of one's core as one breathes in, so that you cause your chest to rise, then your belly to rise, then your chest still more. And as you exhale, your chest to contract, then your belly, then your chest still more. And when you breathe out, you follow the exhalation all the way out to its end without rushing, without bursting out in a great billow of air. Instead, gradually, evenly release the air as if unraveling as if spinning a spiral out into the distance. And then as you inhale, just as gradually from the chest down into the belly and back into the chest. Draw in another breath. And doing this, one learns to breathe calmly and deeply, and this sets the stage for beginning to attend to the subtle centers, which are the roots and branches of the breath. And one can begin by, first of all, as you are seated, feel the earth under you, and feel, if you are in a chair, feel the soles of your feet touching the ground. But whether on a chair or on the ground, be sure at the same time to awaken the tailbone, to feel that this is the base of the spine, and that from the tailbone goes down an invisible root which stretches down into the ground, so that as you inhale, you draw up magnetism from the earth. And as you exhale, all excessive heaviness, every burden sinks down, sifts down the central column and sinks down into the earth. So one relinquishes all stale energy and burdensome heaviness on the exhalation, and on the inhalation, feel an upwelling that revitalizes the foundation of one's spine and seems to mount up from below. Thereafter, when walking, feel the earth under your feet with every footstep. Keep experiencing your body as tethered to the center of the planet. Keep feeling your kinship with the earth, and keep coming back to the awake, sensitive, subtly perceptive quality of the tailbone, and it will more and more develop. So let's just take a few moments in silence now to let the breath go out far as you exhale, to come in deeply as you inhale, and to feel your rootedness in the earth that is beneath you. And then when you're ready, we can lift our hands and say together the words of the prayer Nayaz. Beloved Lord, Almighty God, through the rays of the sun, through the waves of the air, through the all-pervading life in space, purify and revivify me, and I pray, heal my body, heart, and soul. And finally, I would like to turn to the silver rule for today. And that is this: my conscientious self use tact on all occasions. Tact is consideration. Tact is not deception. There is no inconsistency between being honest and being tactful. Tact simply means being honest kindly rather than being honest unkindly. And that is a great art. It's a great art to cultivate. How to tell the truth, to be candid and straightforward, but to do so wisely and kindly. Simply to have the intention to do so and to keep returning to that intention helps us. If it isn't in the front of our mind, we might be less apt to practice tact. But if we have the intention that we will, to the fullest of our power, practice consideration and kindness while being honest, then certainly we'll find a way. And here is a story that illustrates the principle, an amusing story, which comes from the court of Akbar and tells of the exploits of the famous Birbal, who, if you hadn't known of him previously, you perhaps are starting to become acquainted with through our conversations here. Birbal was the great wit of the court of Akbar, who was always one step ahead of every game. But he was a sahib-i-dil. He was a person of heart, so he wasn't merely clever. He was actually kind, and this comes across in so many of the stories. This story tells about a neighbor of Birbal who was greatly interested in prognostications. He was interested in omens, in predictions of the future. And whenever a soothsayer happened to be passing by, he would always engage him and try to obtain a prediction. And so it happened one day, Sadhu, who was an astrologer, came along, and this neighbor invited him in and asked if he would cast his horoscope. And he did. And he said, "Oh, I see that your near and dear ones are going to die before you." And the man was quite upset to hear this, and in fact was enraged. And he said, "Go, get out. Why would you say such a thing? Leave me." And he didn't pay anything at all. He just sent the man away. And so that astrologer was making his way out, and Birbal called him over and said, "What happened? Why was my neighbor so angry?" And he said, "Well, I just told him the truth, but he didn't want to hear it. He couldn't face the truth." And Birbal said, "Don't worry, I'll tell you how to make this right." He said, "Wear a disguise. Come back in a few days." So the astrologer came back in the guise of another astrologer, and sure enough, the neighbor wanted to call him over and to have his horoscope read out. And but this time, the astrologer said what Birbal told him to say. He said, "Ah, wonderful news. You will lead a long life. You will even outlive your near and dear ones." And the man was joyous to hear this news and paid him well and sent him happily on his way. So it was the same message. This man was destined apparently to live longer than members of his family. But at first, the message was, "Oh, your dear ones are going to die before you." But that same message could have been said, "You're going to live long and outlive them." So how we say things is sometimes more important, makes a stronger impact than the actual content of what we say. Is there consideration in how we say it? Is there kindness? Is there an effort to bring some consolation, or at least sympathy and kind attention to the person that we're speaking with? Or are our words just blunt and brusque and hard and sharp? In which case, we would then tend to alienate people, maybe even make enemies, cause hard feelings, disrupt the atmosphere, when we could chart a much clearer path through life, still telling the truth, but in a manner that's kind and tries to have consideration for every soul. So that is our principle for contemplation for the next couple of weeks. I'll say the words, and the second time, if you feel you want to join in the saying of those words, meaning that you want to make this your intention to practice it, then I encourage you. So the words are: my conscientious self use tact on all occasions. My conscientious self use tact on all occasions. Yes, friends, now is the time when our class is going to turn into a sohbat, a conversation amongst those of us gathered here in this room. So it's the chance now for me to say farewell to you who are joining from elsewhere. Goodbye, God bless you, and I hope to see you again soon.